everybody. Beautiful people. Welcome back to the show. First time guest. He's a Muay Thai kickboxing legend. He might be a new voice and a new name for you, but his name's Kevin Ross. Huggy Bear. He goes by a lot of different names. How are you, Kevin? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, man. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Thank you again for the time. I wondered, like, for people who maybe haven't heard your name before, do you think you could give us, I guess, a Cliff's Notes of who you are and what you're doing with yourself these days and what you used to do with your life as well?
Yeah, sure. So I started training in Muay Thai in January of 2003. I had my first fight that year. So I was 23 years old when I started my career, which is relatively late in the fight game, particularly being able to make it to the levels that I did. But I fought for 20 years. I just retired 2 years ago in June. And then I've been teaching and still training every day and doing all that ever since. Just moving more into the coaching aspect of the game, but still training all the time.
Mhm.
It's still very much involved in the sport, and it's something that I'll always be involved with. It really was a sport that saved my life, and um, I'll be involved in it till I'm not breathing no more.
Till the wheels fall off, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, as I guess a late bloomer into martial art, especially for people who maybe don't know a ton about Muay Thai, there's obviously a pretty big steeped history of Muay Thai fighters coming out of Thailand who are training from the time they're
Yeah,
5 or 6 years old. So you're
yeah.
competing with people who have been doing it for a long time. What sort of
Uh-huh.
what pushed you to get into it in the first place? And did you feel when you started, were you feeling that in the back of your head that, oh, I'm almost handicapped because of the fact that I'm starting so late? Like, was that hard for you to get through?
Yeah, it was incredibly hard because I actually learned about the sport in 2000, or sorry, 95.
Mm,
So I was 15 years old when I first saw Muay Thai on TV. Never heard of it, didn't know what it was, and it was just something that lit a fire in me when I first saw it, and I always wanted to do it. But even at that age, I felt like I was relatively old. I mean, coming from America, we were most of the people doing this in Thailand, they start when they're very, very young, 6 years old, 8 years old, and they're involved and they're 100% dedicated to the sport and they move into the camps, and it's just their life. So I was already viewing myself as old at 15 years old
yeah.
and again, being from America. And it was something that I just put in the back of my mind, but it was
Mm,
something that I always wanted to do. Unfortunately, I was really busy partying and drinking and pissing my life away.
yeah.
I moved to Vegas in '95, and that's really where gasoline got poured on the fire, so to
Mm,
say. I started getting into drugs and alcohol at a very young age, about 12 years old. So, but
okay.
by the time I got to Vegas, it got bad. It got real bad real quick. So that was something that kept me from ever really going after this. And my age and where I was from and everything was just something I used as an excuse not to
Mm,
ever try it. But over the years, things kept progressing and getting worse. And one of my best friends passed away in 1999, and he was the only person I ever told about this dream I had about wanting to fight. And when he died, I promised myself that I would go after this, but unfortunately his death really sent me right over the edge. And it wasn't till um, going into 2003 that I finally realized how much of my life I had wasted. And go January 2003, I started, and yeah, I mean, being that age was certainly a handicap that I knew, but at the same time, it was just an excuse that I was giving myself not to go after this.
mm,
It's like no one can say who can and cannot make it until you actually go for it. And I finally realized that I was the one giving myself all these excuses. Nobody else was holding this over my head. Everyone's got a reason not to do things. We all have
mm,
excuses not to do things. We justify why we don't because of X, Y, and Z, but everybody has that.
mm,
Nobody's just handed things. And if they are, they probably aren't going to make it very far, or they're not going to be able to maintain it that long because you have to develop and grow and gain strength and fail your way to success. So as something that should have been a hindrance to me, I actually used that as fuel because I knew how far behind I was. I knew how late I had started. I knew how much time I had wasted from
Mm.
the time I had learned about it to the time I started was almost 10 years. So
Yeah.
for me, everything from day one was playing catch up. I didn't have
Mm.
time to, screw off or take it easy. Every day, every moment of my life was 100% focused on this goal. And I maintained that throughout my entire career because I always felt like I was playing catch up. I always felt like I wasn't going to be good enough. That I had my sights set on impossible goals, basically. You can't reach this goal, but how close to that goal can I get? So I never got to a point when I felt like I'd made it or done
Mm.
a lot
Yeah.
because I was viewing these people as the best in the world or the best of all time. Like that's your goal, right?
Yeah.
So there's no point where you just feel like you've done something like
Mm.
compared to who. I'm
Yeah.
comparing myself to impossible goals. So
Yeah.
that was always that fuel for me and allowed me to stay humble, I guess, and never feel like I was better than anybody else because I
Mm.
feel like I feel like we're all on this journey. And just because someone's done more doesn't mean they're any closer to that
Yeah.
impossible goal at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, especially in the I guess in the way of looking through life of never really attaining some perfection that you have in your head, but always striving for it. Is just based on how you've explained that, it sounds like it could also be a double-edged sword for you because you will never feel like you've attained exactly where you want to be. You're
Yeah,
always going to be finding ways to tell yourself why you need to be better, and
yeah,
sometimes that can affect like your happiness. Do you know what I
for
mean?
sure,
Like, do you
for
look
sure.
back and do you look back and wish you'd given yourself more of a pat on the back for the achievements you did get? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. But there is a balance there,
Yeah,
so it's not to say I would accomplish something and feel like it's nothing, but
yeah,
it's to say that okay, I accomplished this. I'm very happy and grateful for what I was able to do, but there's more work to do. We gotta go
yeah,
to the next thing. And that
yeah,
maintaining that outlook, regardless of wins and losses, I think is the key. The problem is not being so hard on yourself that you feel like you're a piece of shit just because you haven't
yeah, yeah,
reached that
yeah,
unattainable goal,
yeah,
right? So it's
yeah,
just like anything else in life. It's about that balance and always pushing yourself more to the far end than sitting back and saying, "Oh, I'm so good. I've accomplished so much," because that just makes us lazy and weak and allows us to feel like we're better than other people that haven't done that when
mm,
you haven't done shit.
yeah, yeah, and real quick again on the I guess the catalyst of you getting into and pursuing your dream of being a fighter. I had one friend pass away a couple of years ago from, I guess related to addiction. And
Mhm.
um, no matter how many times me or other people tried to like talk to him about, um, you know, trying to support him into going to a rehab or just trying to figure out a way to get to a better point in his life health wise where he could move away from drugs. Uh, it would never really work. And I started to convince myself, and I think it might be true that a lot of people are never going to help. Nobody, it doesn't matter how many people want to help them. It's got to be a personal choice.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you could speak to that. If the one person that you spoke to that passed away that knew of this dream you had, once he
Uh-huh.
passes away, it sort of sends you down a bit deeper of a hole, and you sort of crawl out of that later on and decide, okay, I'm going to commit to this. Like, why did you decide a few years later? Like, what was the catalyst for you to go, okay, like enough of this, I'm going to just go for it?
Yeah. So there was a lot of things that were happening. More friends were passing away, going to jail, getting in bad car accidents. Myself almost getting into so many. And it was more like a continual process, not just one thing happened. It was repetitive things happening over and over and over. And then one year, I almost got into what would have been a car accident that should have killed me. I almost got plowed over by this semi, and it was actually on. I didn't think I was going to ever make it to the year 2000, right?
Mm,
So this actually happened about an hour before New Year's that year, and that was something that really kind of woke me up. But even at that time, I mean, it was still another 3 years, but it was moments like that that continued to happen. And then one day it just kind of hit me out of the blue. I'm like, my friend passed away almost 4 years ago now. You promised him you would live your life for him, if not for yourself. And not only have you not done that, but you've actually gone in the other direction. You've made it worse. And you're giving this gift away of life, and you're pissing it away because of all of your fears and all of your
Mm,
excuses. And if your friend was alive, he'd beat the fuck out of you for wasting your
mm.
life. Like he didn't get to live, and here you are
Yeah, yeah.
being a baby about it, right? So that was something like I couldn't ignore it anymore. It's like we all give ourselves excuses, and a lot of our excuses are valid reasons why we don't do something.
Mm,
But when it comes down to it, none of those excuses mean anything. You're either going to do this, or you're not. And if you're not, you need to understand that it's your choice not to. Nobody else
mm,
is keeping you from doing this. And that was that thing that clicked in my brain to where I could no longer look myself in the mirror anymore and lie to myself that I wasn't doing this because of X, Y, and Z, right? It was
mm.
like you either do this or you don't. And that was it. I guess we all get to that breaking point of not being able to lie to ourselves anymore. No matter who's in our lives, who's trying to help us, who's not trying to help us, what good or bad things are happening, eventually we all have to make the choice. And whether we do or not, that's all on us. And it does make it difficult when you have other people in your life going through that, because one, there's nothing you can really do or say to them.
Mm.
You can encourage them, you can be there to love them and help guide them, and hopefully not make things worse for them. Or sometimes our help actually ends up hurting people. But who's to say what that balance is and what it is?
Yeah.
But as you said, it's like all you can do is open the door for people. They have to walk through it
Yeah,
themselves.
yeah. It's a weird balance to strike because I remember in my own life, like you wonder whether you're just enabling their problems rather than trying to get them in a better position. And you can only say so many times how much you just have to tell them you love them and
Yeah,
hope that they decide for themselves. On the Muay Thai side of things, so there was I don't know if you probably know John Wayne Parr, the
yeah,
kickboxer. So
yeah,
the way I was introduced to kickboxing or Muay Thai was there was that reality TV show called like The Contender, I think, and they
yeah.
did one called The Contender Thailand, I think, and it was a
Mm.
Muay Thai kickboxing
Uh-huh.
show that I
Yeah.
watched as like an 8-year-old, and I thought it was the
Oh yeah.
coolest shit ever. I was so into it.
Damn, 8 years old. You're making me feel old as
Yeah,
shit.
sorry. Well, dude, you were telling me about things you were doing. I was born in 97, so I feel really I'm
Okay,
not I
okay.
might not get all the references. Like I still to this day don't understand why everyone thought the year 2000 was so crazy. I don't so
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but with the kickboxing stuff, like I remember learning from that show that even those people that were on this reality TV show, they weren't making crazy amounts of money pursuing
yeah,
this dream and being in this sport. Like what was it like for you in America, where I feel like where
yeah.
was kickboxing at when you were getting into it? Like how popular was it?
It was non-existent. People
Yeah.
didn't know what it was. There
Yep.
was actually a big movement here in the 90s with American kickboxing, with the pants. I
Okay.
mean, they used to have huge shows. They were on ESPN. They'd have, sellout crowds, but then that died off. And again, that was American kickboxing, not Muay Thai or even just regular kickboxing. So when I started Muay Thai, nobody knew what it was. And anytime you told people you did Muay Thai, you'd have to say it's like kickboxing, which
Okay.
which for a Muay Thai person is just like heartbreaking. It's like someone that does rugby saying that they play football. I'm
Okay.
sure to them,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, they're similar, but they're not the
Yeah.
same, not even a
Yeah.
little bit. So that was kind of the thing. And a lot of times you would just say, yeah, it's like kickboxing because you don't feel like explaining it, but like
Yeah.
it like leaves a hole in your heart every time you have to
Yeah.
say that. So yeah, it was one of those things that nobody knew what it was. The only people that did it were doing it because they loved it, which made
Yeah.
it great.
Yeah.
It's like back then it was like the wild, wild west out here. We would just like hop in the car and like travel to gyms all over the country and hope we could get a fight. And
Yeah.
you would fight people that outweighed you by 20 pounds or had like 30 fights. And it was just the way that it was back then. And
Mm.
it was so great looking back on that. And that's what you just love that purity of it. You're in this time when it's like this brand new thing to the
Mm,
world, or to our worlds anyway.
yeah,
And as things progress and get bigger and better, which you hope that they do, they also get worse at the same time, because
yeah,
you can't just grow the good side of something.
no,
The opposite side of that has to grow as well. So I'm very grateful that I was able to come up in that time, in that era, and watch the sport progress and go through its changes. And yeah, it's very cool to look back on all that and know that I was part of that. And and even looking previous to that, there were so many people that had come before me that probably don't get any of the credit or recognition that they deserve. People look at me as, I was like the one of the in the generation that brought the Muay Thai to the forefront. But there was so many people before us that had done so much, and no one ever knows about or has heard
mm.
of.
On the scale of kickboxing that it is now, and if you go on YouTube, lots of people are going to call you, I guess, the poster boy of American Muay Thai. Like you're one of the
Yeah.
guys that people think of. Is that
Uh-huh.
something that does that creep you out or freak you out that people think of you in that esteem? Do you get what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
you probably
Yeah.
didn't start it. You obviously had high hopes and high dreams that you were trying to achieve, but you seem like someone that probably doesn't, if someone came up to you in the street and was like, man, I'm a big fan, like, rah, rah, rah,
Yeah.
like, it'd probably not make your day. You'd probably be a bit weirded out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like when it first started, it really weirded me out and
Yeah.
made me feel really strange and uncomfortable. And because I have never viewed myself as that person. I don't view myself the way that other people in this, especially in the sport, view me. I view myself the same way as somebody that's just getting started, because I'm just trying to be better. I'm
Mm,
trying to be better. That's it. Just like anybody else is. Somebody that starts on the first day, they're just trying to be better.
yeah.
That's it. And that should be the goal of all of us. So yeah, when that started happening, it really freaked me out, particularly at the time that it did, because this was before YouTube and anything. And so anytime someone would say they knew who I was, I'm like, how is that even possible? I'm not on TV, there's no
Yeah.
YouTube. There's no way to view me fighting unless you were at the fight, right?
Yeah.
And then as things progressed, as the internet and YouTube and everything, then it became more like, okay, I understand. And you know, it would still be people in the sport, but then once people outside the sport started recognizing you, that's once like lion fights started, and it was on national television, and that's when that became that. But it had gotten to the point when, even though I never felt like that person, I just accepted that that's who I am to other people. When I was able to embrace it in that regard, and I used it as just further motivation to be better. I was like,
Mm,
I am this person in the sport, so I need to be at my very best, and really hold that line for people.
mm. The way I've sort of figured out how to improve on myself and learn from other people is asking, like, if you could go back to a 25-year-old version of you, and assuming he listens to what you have to say, what do you think you would tell that person?
Yeah, 25. Well, I was already in the midst of training and fighting and everything. So it's hard to say what you would do, right?
Mm,
Because if you change one thing, you change everything.
yeah.
And who's to say that would put you in a better or worse
Yeah.
position, right? So it's difficult for me to say what I would change. I don't really know what I would change. I think that's what I'm very grateful for, because when I did start, I did view every day as extra credit in my life, because I knew I shouldn't be alive anyway, right? So there was nothing I really held myself back from or didn't do because I was afraid or self-conscious or any of those things, because I was always pushing myself beyond that, because every time it was like, you're not supposed to be alive right now,
Mm,
so this is all extra for you,
yeah.
so you better fucking use this time. And I feel like that's how we should all look at it, regardless of what kind of lifestyle you live. Like, technically, none of us should really be alive right now. We've all had at least something in our life that should have kept us from being where we are at right now, yet we made it through that. And are you going to use this extra time you have, or are you going to waste it? Are you going to piss it away? Are you going to let those same excuses that you gave yourself before things that happened keep you down, and that's on you. That's on us. We have a decision. We all have a decision. That's that accountability that I think is so important that we all hold ourselves to,
Mm.
not comparing ourselves to other people or anything like that. The only time you should compare yourself to somebody else is if you're using it as motivation,
Yeah.
not as something to break you down and make you
Mm.
feel like you're worthless and haven't done anything in your life, unless that's helpful for you. Like
Yeah, yeah,
some people need to feel
yeah.
that way, you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
that's what makes so much of life difficult, is because we're all so unique, and what works for me
yeah,
won't work for you.
yeah.
All I can do is say, this is what I did,
Mm.
and you can implement some of those things into your life or not. But sometimes what I did would be the worst thing for somebody. I don't want
Mm.
anyone to, or I wouldn't try to convince anyone to try to do the things that I've done, whether it's in the sport or in life. Just because I did them doesn't mean you can do
Mm.
them or you should do them, because they might not end up in the same result. You're a different person. This is a different time.
Mm.
It's
Fair.
all these
No, that's fair.
factors.
Yeah, that's fair. Speaking again on, I guess the something I learned again when I was in Canada, I got the chance to train with a few people who ended up becoming or spent some time in the UFC. A few people that were kickboxing. I don't think Muay Thai is even legal in Canada, from what I remember. So it was all
Yeah, yeah,
kickboxing. A lot of those people they struggled with the transition from moving out of being a fighter and that being their life, and how it revolved around, like, their day was revolved around making sure they trained, eating the proper foods, getting the proper rest. Transitioning out of being a fighter and finding something else to do was a struggle for them. Could you
yeah.
speak to, if you're happy to, like, how that transition has been for you, and whether that was as much of a challenge for you as it can be for a lot of fighters?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, any change is difficult, whether it's
Mm.
doing something good or starting something or stopping something, particularly stopping something that you want to do or that you're used to doing. Even an addiction, stopping is that's why it's so hard, because you're in essence changing who you are as an individual. The person is changing, right? Whether you're adding something or taking something away, and it's like you're killing part of yourself. Well, that's how it can feel,
Mm.
and that's why it's so difficult for all of us to change. And again, regardless of which direction you're going, right?
Yeah.
So starting can be just as tough as stopping something can be in a lot of ways. A lot of ways, stopping can be even more difficult, particularly when you're stopping something that you love, and that was such a positive thing in your life. For myself, I was very fortunate to again start so late, so I never felt like I was owed anything, or you're going to have this 20-year career. Every day was you better make the most out of this day, because this might be it for you. This
Mm.
moment might make the last for you. So because of that, I think I was always mentally and emotionally prepared for the end, right?
Mm.
Because it was always the end for me. This was always extra. I never thought I was going to have one fight, let alone 75, right? 20 years of this shit. Like, I look back now, I'm like, damn, that was crazy, right?
Yeah.
So compared to most people, yeah, it was an easier transition for me because I was more prepared for it, but it was still difficult.
Yeah.
Like, I was ready to retire. I wanted to retire. I knew that this wasn't I wasn't going to play at that level anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's and I was done, and I'd done so much. So but it was still really, really hard for me. And that's why when I stopped, I just stopped everything for like a month. I was like, I need to just break free, reset my brain, my body, my emotions, and then from there, all right, let's move forward. So I stopped doing anything, even anything physical, which is awful if you're,
Yeah.
because staying active is very, very important. But I did need to force myself to have that break. So what it started out was, all right, we can't live like this. Like, this is terrible.
Yeah.
We got to at least like go for a walk every day. And then it was like,
Yeah.
all right, so I started doing that, feeling a little bit better. Then I started getting back into working out a little bit. Then I started training again a little bit. Then I was like, okay, this feels good. You have to maintain some level of consistency, whether it's training or just taking care of your health, taking care of your mind, you know, uh, fortunately, fighting or anything physical, health tends to be a byproduct of that, because you're
Yeah.
just doing it and it comes with the territory. But we all need that. It doesn't have to necessarily be fighting, but we all need something that pushes us mentally, physically, and emotionally every day, or else we will get weaker and
Yeah.
sicker, and things will tend to just fall apart, and we don't necessarily understand why. And that's why it's so important for us all to just focus on what we can do for ourselves, at least every day,
Yeah.
a little bit every day. And it doesn't have to be a physical thing. It does need to be something that's relatively difficult, or something that you don't necessarily want to do,
Yeah.
right? So like a person that's stuck in a full body cast, like, yeah, obviously they can't get up and go for a walk every day, but they can do something with their mind every
Yeah.
day. They can force themselves to do something difficult. That difficulty is what allows us to get stronger in all areas of our life, because we're strengthening our base, and then we're more prepared for the really bad things that tend to happen in our lives, whether
Yeah.
that's somebody dying, losing a job, what's going on in the world. You saw how bad that was for so many people. Like, how many people came out of that stronger and better, and how many people came out of that worse,
Yeah.
weaker, poor, more unhealthy. And that, so much of that was a matter of, did people take control of the things they had control over?
Yeah.
And at the very least, that's our own health and well-being, and what we do with our mind. And that's something that I try to always remind myself. And I see how easily it is for that to slip away,
Mm.
especially now when I don't have to go to the gym every day. It's very easy for me to start slipping back into that old life I used to have, because no matter how far away we get from our addictions or bad relationships or whatever the case may be, we're never any farther away from it in our
Yeah.
mind, because we can turn around and it's right there. And that's something that's, I think, always helped me, not hurt me, because it's like, I know that's right there behind me, right? I can feel like I've done so much. I turned my entire life around. I've done so many positive things, but I could be right back there tomorrow. I could be right back there today,
Mm.
if I let myself. And I can feel that stuff creeping back in anytime I just take it a little bit easy, or when something negative happens. I could very easily slip back into that. So staying vigilant about that and reminding myself, you're still there, you're still in the shit, right? It's just a matter of what direction you're going,
Yeah.
even though you're always hanging on it. You're always
Yeah.
hanging in that area, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I try to maintain in my mind. And it can be tough though, because then it feels like you're never going to get out of it, but you're not ever going to get out of it. So
Nah.
accept that. It's like, you're
Yeah.
never going to get out of this life alive either, right?
Yeah.
So does that mean you just say fuck it and, piss your life away? That you
Yeah.
can if you want to, but that's a choice we all got to make. And every day, it's a daily choice, right? It's a moment to moment choice. It's not just like you're strong one day and then you're strong forever, right? I'm not any stronger than anybody else, because I can fall victim to all those things just as easily,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so do you think because for you, starting and pursuing your dreams as a fighter was just an added bonus, considering where you could have ended up throughout
Uh,
your days of drinking and just getting up to all sorts of mischief? Like, have you
yeah,
always had that day by day, let's just focus on what I can control? And is that always something you've had, or is it something that developed over your career?
it didn't. I mean, it didn't start till I started training,
Okay.
obviously, because I was killing myself every day.
Yeah.
I think from that point forward, because of how far behind I fell, or was, the question for me was, okay, but what can you do about it?
Yeah.
And that's like, you can be more consistent than anybody else. You can push yourself harder than anybody else. You can minimize these things that slow us all down, those excuses that we make, right? The times, say, like after a fight, people tend to take a break and then they come back all fat and out of shape, and
Yeah.
they've been partying, and it's like, okay, well, what, you don't have to do that, right?
Yeah.
It's, I mean, it is important to have that balance in your life and those breaks, particularly when you push it yourself to such a high extent. but we use that as such an excuse, like, oh, I need a break. Like, yeah, maybe for a little bit, but you don't need a month off.
Yeah.
Maybe you need a day off, and
Yeah.
maybe you need to downshift a little bit, but that doesn't mean stop and go in the other direction, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I was always more on the push yourself too hard end, because I knew at the very least I wasn't not doing enough, right?
Yeah.
It was always that. And I think that's what always kept me from falling victim to those things. Like, I would still take breaks and, fuck off for times, and there was times when I did it a lot more than I should have, right?
Mm.
And I really did let myself get a little bit too lazy, right? But not anywhere compared to others. But again, it's like, who are you comparing yourself to? Are you comparing yourself to someone that is worse than you, and is lazier than you, and is more out of shape than you? Or are you comparing yourself to someone that's better than you, that pushes themselves, that keeps
Yeah.
themselves more accountable? Where do you draw that line, right? And that again, that's all on us. Nobody else can say where you should put your sights on, where you should set your bar. You have to do that, right?
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm too cheap to pay for a Zoom subscription, and I've got so I've
You're
got
good,
3 minutes on this. So I just want to say thank you again for the time. Do you reckon you could just let people know how they can, follow your journey if they liked what they heard and they want to just see what you're up to, or keep in touch in however way you want? Just let them know, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, for sure, man. The easiest way to keep track of me, I'm the most active on Instagram. So my Instagram is Instagram, whatever it is, /the Soul Assassin, DA Soul Assassin.
Yeah.
But you can always follow me on my website, which is thesoulasssassin.com, and that's where I got all my merch and books and stuff like that.
Sweet.
But I'm pretty easy to track down and find, especially in this
Easy.
day and age. Just look
Easy,
me up
man.
and you can get a hold of me.
Easy. And please, anyone listening who wants to sort of get an idea of Kevin's fighting, just go on YouTube. It's a great rabbit hole to go down, man. So sick,
Thank you.
so sick. But thanks again for the
Okay.
time. I really appreciate it. Seriously, man. It was
Yeah,
really cool to
my
chat to you
pleasure.
and pick your brain.
My pleasure, man. Good talking to
Easy,
you.
man. Have a good day. All
All
right.
right,
See ya.
later, bud. Likewise.